Hello. The claim that I'm responding to is the recent increase in deaths of law enforcement officers in the United States is directly related to current psychological state of our society. Okay. The response to the secondary claim, which is violence in society, seems to stem more and more from video games and entertainment industry. My opponent's evidence does not connect to the main claim. She mentioned violence as a consequence of playing video games, but violence does not necessarily mean that you are going to go kill an officer. My opponent's proposal is hasty generalization. She argues that one of the main reasons for the increase of deaths is law enforcement officers is video games. For example, not everyone who plays video games is going to shoot an officer, and not everyone who kills an officer plays video games. In response to the secondary claim, to this number 2, which is the current stress of degrading economy are causing people to react to the issues in irrational manner. First of all, she didn't give any proof that can relate to the economic crisis with officers' death. She makes reasoning by cause and effect. She mentioned when economy fails, crime goes up, people become desperate to survive and act in ways they wouldn't ordinarily act. She used the Pittsburgh shooting as an example, but there are no sufficient cases to support the claim. My opponent argues that the current economic crisis causes people to react in a rational manner. However, according to the Law Enforcement magazine, 2008 is ending as one of the safest years for the U.S. enforcement in decades. The number of officers killed. It also says that the number of officers killed in the line of duty fell sharply this year, which is the year of 2008. Therefore, the current economic crisis cannot be related to deaths of law enforcement officers. The response to the third secondary claim, which is the growing disrespect for law enforcement, can be contributed to negative media coverage as well as how officers are depicted in the entertainment industry. My opponent argues that negative media coverage is harmful and causes distorted view of law enforcement. She also argues that this unfavorable view leads to conflict between the public and police, and ultimately leads to shootouts. Her third secondary claim does not relate to the main claim. Her claim is more informative rather than a claim of fact. There is not enough evidence that shows that media conducts people to misbehave towards law enforcement officers. As my conclusion, my opponent's argument is more of a hypothesis. She does not prove facts or statistics to prove that her claim is valid. In her main claim, she argues that there is a recent increase in deaths of law enforcement. But as mentioned before by the police magazine, there has actually been a decrease in deaths in the past year. Thank you.
All right, well, you've labeled the advocate's claims pretty clearly. You've got good signposting as you go through each of those points. The challenge on the violence link to video games, I think, is okay. You make an argument that's a hasty generalization, and then you say, well, not everyone who kills plays video games, and not everybody who plays video games kills. And so says you. I don't know that. I mean, I think it's generally true, but if you had some statistical information about the number of people who played video games, I think you could contrast that immensely with the amount of violence that is perpetrated every year, especially violence against police officers, and see that there's a substantial difference, and that would not have been hard to find some information on. The challenge to the link to the economy on the second point, I didn't think that was as clear as it should be. There's an argument about a lack of data, and you make a reference to the Pittsburgh case. That's the advocate's claim. You don't say anything in particular about the Pittsburgh case. You do have a good piece of counter evidence on the for the last year on law enforcement officers being killed and how it's the lowest number that we've had in decades. I think that's pretty good, except of course that the advocate is making an argument about contemporary times, and most of their examples were within the last month or so. So I think you do need to attack that a little bit more directly, but I did think that was a good counter strategy on that particular point. Again, very good signposting on the movement to the third issue. There's very limited audience contact in your presentation, not adding much to your credibility on these arguments. The information on the media is it's challenged a little bit, but again, I think you could be a little bit more convincing on this point. I didn't see a lot of development of proof on these issues from your point of view, just maybe a couple of questions about what the advocate presented. All right, thank you.